Hi there. So, in this video, I am just discussing how I will routinely take apart my KORG is50 keyboard to rearrange the keys. So, it's really a quite simple process, but I just wanted to walk through it so you could see it on the inside, because a lot of people wonder where I got it, what I do with it, things like that. So, with the electronic sounds, I haven't figured out how to manipulate the MIDI of the keyboard sounds themselves yet. I think Aaron Hunt's HPi box does that. And I don't really need to do that right now. So I'm just plugging a MIDI cable, so MIDI with one end, and then USB in the other end. I'm plugging that into the computer and then just having a synth generate the sounds. Which means that if things are retuned on the computer and they match up to the keyboard interface here, then I don't have to deal with any of the stuff in the actual keyboard itself. Okay, so discussing what I do when I take this keyboard apart. Well, first of all, I bought a KORG is50, and then I knew that KORG models had keys inside that would be able to be removed individually, so I also have all of these extra keys here. And I painted them all pink because the two models were different colors. So, you know, they kind of looked like dead teeth when I mixed the keys together. So the first thing I do when I take the keyboard apart is I just unplug everything, and I sort of put it all in one place. So, you know, here's the MIDI, here's the power, here's the pedal. So I'm just sticking that over here, all in one spot. And then on its stand, what I do is I turn it over, and I take the necessary screws out. Now, you can see, maybe you can't, on the back here there are a ton of holes. So there used to be like 20 screws in it, but there are really only 5 here now that I routinely screw in, and that's why I have this little cup here, so that when I take the screws out, I can just put the screws in the cup. So normally when I take apart this keyboard and change the keys, it takes me something like half an hour, and most of it is putting the new keys in, because you have to figure out that formation and then put those in. So I've got a screw here that I take out, and then 2 other ones here. So the ones that are down here might be a little bit tough, but, you know, I can figure it out. Now, it would be something that would potentially be feasible in a longer concert. Say, if I wanted to play it in 2 different tuning formations, and I happen to have a piece on the beginning of the concert, and then at the end of the concert, way later, then I could potentially change it in between. But it might be difficult in a situation where I was crunched for time. With these 2 screws that are way down in deep holes, that are sort of on the end here, what I like to do is I like to use my flashlight and look down to make sure that it's screwed out, because otherwise I can't really see how to line up the screwdriver with the screw itself. So both seem pretty loose, so now hopefully I should be able to just get them to fall out. So now that all the screws are out, what I do is I take it apart like this, putting it here, making sure I have a little bit of extra room over in this little area. I sort of swing it. So I pull it up, and I swing this off, and maybe you can see it, maybe not, but there are some wires right here that are connected, so my goal is to not really put stress on those wires. And the next part to unscrew is the part that's right here connecting the keyboard, and actually I'm going to move the camera around so you can see that. So you can see that here we've got a screw, and then there's also 1 screw in the middle and 1 screw here. Originally there were 5, so I usually like to take apart the end screws first, because I don't want the tension to get messed up, and the screws that handle these keys are significantly smaller. So now we are taking the actual plastic keys that we used to play out of their little hole that they are in, So those are pretty easy to unscrew comparatively. And then what happens is, it may not fall out. It will it can sort of hang out in there, but it can fall out the back. So I like to hold it up just a little bit. It doesn't put too much stress on the keys for me to just grab the white keys with my hand right here. If you can see that on the very edge of the screen. And then what I do is, okay, so I'm taking these keys out of their hole and I'm just raising them a little bit, making sure the wires that are connected to them in the back don't disconnect. So now they are out. And then we take this front part and we put it down. Alright, so there we go. You see that the keys are out. And now, if I put this together right, it can snap down like I'm screwing it back together. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So, you can see that we've got these springs out now. And what I want to do is, I want to rearrange this keyboard. So, it's in a 15-tone layout right now, and I'm changing it to a 17-tone layout. So, I can just use my fingernail to grab these. It's usually easier to use a pair of pliers, but anyway, I can just pull the spring out, and it's like, the spring kind of holds the key down, so you just have to pull it up with a little pressure and then out. And this is the beauty of the keys. You can see that they are all rearrangeable. They don't distinguish between how they're normally put together in 12-tone equal temperament, which means you can rearrange them in any shape you like, provided that they fit together. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take apart the 15-tone and then rearrange it into 17-tone. So, another thing you can do here is, like what I'm doing here, before we time-lapse this real good, is removing the white keys first. Or pink keys, I suppose, because they hold the black keys in place. So, that sort of becomes the way to take it apart and put it back together, and then having the layout in advance ready to put things together again. So with the 17-tone layout, things are pretty straightforward because it's going to be like a 12-tone equal tempered keyboard, except it's going to have 2 black keys where every 1 black key normally is, and that's the only difference. But a 15-tone keyboard is a little bit different. It's a little bit harder because what happens is you have to have a lot more white keys bunched together. So the key to doing that is to have D and G and A placed in the correct manner. So a 15-tone keyboard is a little bit harder to rearrange. If you see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 white keys here in a row, the actual letters for these here right now are C, 2 G's, 2 D's, 2 A's, and a B. I could replace the C with an F if I wanted. So basically, the F and the B act as little outside letters. And the G and A keys do not actually split evenly in half. They actually have slightly more horizontal key section pointing inwards. So that's why you can't just put G's, A's, and D's randomly together wherever you want your white keys to be together. You need to put if you have a group of white keys together, and you're making it an unconventional grouping, you need to have the D's in the middle, and then the G's and the A's need to be outside. So that's what I'm doing to mine here. Okay. So now that it's finally together, as you can see, what we need to do is test it. so that happens before we put it back together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that my MIDI cables are plugged in. Basically, the reason I'm testing it now is so that I don't put it back together and then have to test it and find out one of the keys doesn't work, thus resulting in me having to take it apart again. So, here we go. We're going to get this cord. And now I am going to plug this into my computer. Here's my computer. And I'm just going to, come on, gonna plug the flash drive in over here. And then I can just put it right here. And then I'll also plug the power cord in. So we've got power. Yay. So I can do that. Basically, it's like I can put this back together, except this hole is out. And it's sort of over where it actually normally goes. I just have to bring up Absinthe. Okay, so I just kind of pull the hole out a little bit so the electronics are still connected, and then when I get about halfway down the hole, instead of like leaning on one side of it, I switch and I pull this side up instead. See, that was the volume on the actual keyboard itself being up. And it looks like all of the keys work just fine, and I think it is tuned in 17. Good. So, now that the keys work, I can put it all back together. So, turn the keyboard off. I make sure when I take it apart that the stuff is unplugged from here, because I can't, the part that's plugged in goes through the top part. So if I were to try and take the top up with it still plugged in, the plugs would essentially stop it. So that's not good for it. Okay, so, doing the reverse of what we did earlier, I take the whole thing, this crap is being crap, and then I pull it up like this. Here we go. The hole is loose, so as I arch it over, I kind of hold one key down so that it stays like this. And then I take the little hole part itself and I stick it under. And then I make sure that the paint keys, they have these little edges right here. I make sure that this little edge is slightly past the gray part instead of sticking out. And then the screws should line up. So now I'm just kind of holding the keyboard here, getting my screws out of my little cup. I see the long skinny screws, so I attach the middle one first. So now, just making sure that it's screwed in, and not dropping the screwdriver in the delicate machinery. Okay, good. So now I lift this up, put it right back over, find that sweet spot. Now I have a 17-tone keyboard ready to go, and the only thing I have to do is screw in the screws on the back. And again, for me, I do 5 screws. I screw in 1 on each of the 4 corners, 2 which are deep holes, and thus harder to do, and then I do 1 in the middle on this top part here, because it doesn't have much length. Okay, good, so hopefully you learned a lot about the inside of the keyboard. There's also some other phenomenon, like there are the keys from the old model and the new model are slightly different, so I try to use the ones from the old model because that's the one that this is. And then if one of the keys doesn't work, what I do is I try and switch the springs and keys around so that they get a little bit of a better orientation randomly. Although I think that's mostly trial and error. Okay, there we go. See you later.